What's the scariest theory known to man? Vaccinated jet fuel can melt autism. Holy it. If you are high right now, get the duck out of here. This is the most terrifying thread ever. The infinite Hitlers theory states that there is always an infinite number of Hitlers hiding right outside of your field of vision. More than, let's say, we have an anthill in the middle of the forest, and right next to the anthill, they're building a 10-lane superhighway. And the question is, would the ants be able to understand what a 10-lane superhighway is? Would the ants be able to understand the technology and the intentions of the beings building the highway next to them? More than so, it's not that we can't pick up the signals from Planet X using our technology. It's that we can't even comprehend what the beings from Planet X are or what they're trying to do. It's so beyond us that even if they really wanted to enlighten us, it would be like trying to teach ants about the internet. I forget the name of the argument, but it goes as follows. Assumptions. The brain is the origin of all consciousness. The brain operates on electrical impulses. External stimuli can affect the way the brain operates. Any external stimuli to the brain can be simulated to a degree that the brain cannot distinguish these simulated stimuli from natural stimuli. The point, you could be a brain in a jar, being fed false impulses for your entire life by an external source. Or, you, still a brain in a jar, could be hallucinating your entire life from lack of stimuli. Edit. Formatting. Edit. Brain in a vat. Also, nod to the 20 or so like the Matrix posts. I envisioned the brain being removed from the body, which is not the case with the Matrix. As an astronomer, I feel like I always pop into these threads to clarify theories people saw on a documentary once. So here's one that freaks me out a little, that the universe is a false vacuum. This is, in short, a theory scientific hypothesis that our universe is actually in a false phase state as part of a larger universe. Like if it were in a temporary thing. Think the real universe is a pot of boiling water, and we are just within a bubble forming at the bottom of the pot. Eventually, however, that false vacuum has to pop, yes. Even after billions of years in this false state, and we and everything we know in our visible universe will disappear in an instant with no warning whatsoever, and there's nothing you can do about it. Sweet dreams. Edit. Clarity. The Great Filter. It's a theory about why the universe seems so filled with potential for life and yet we haven't found it. It states that somewhere between pre-life and an advanced civilization capable of colonizing the stars, there's a great filter that stops them and ends life. This means humans fit into one of these three scenarios. Capital A. We're rare, meaning we've already passed the Great Filter, unlike other civilizations on other planets. Capital B. We're the first, meaning conditions in the universe are only now life-friendly and we're among many on our way to the capability of colonization. Capital C. We haven't hit the filter yet, meaning we're ducked. If this one is true, it means finding life or proof of life on Mars or Europa would be awful news, because it would almost certainly mean the filter is still ahead of us instead of behind us. More good reading. Edit. A full paper from Nick Bostrom. There is a spooky skeleton inside all of us. Has to be the heat death of the universe. The universe will keep expanding and energy will keep diffusing until everything is homogeneous. And then, nothing can happen. Eternal stillness. We are currently living through what many biologists consider to be the 6th mass extinction that the world has ever seen. This is going to be an interesting puzzle for the species that comes after us. Can you explain this a bit more? I'm really interested, but I'm not sure I understand. It wasn't until around the year 1800 that humanity reached a population of 1 billion after thousands and thousands of years. In the 215 years since then, the world population has increased to 7.2 billion. That exponential growth has very large and long-lasting negative effects on our planet, and will continue to do so until we reach carrying capacity and die off. Edit. I'll expand on human population a little more. Most modern scientists have the human species being around 200,000 years old based on fossil records. Around the year 1800 is when human population first hit 1 billion. That means it took 198,200 years to reach that number. Human population hit 2 billion around 1927. Human population hit 3 billion around 1959. Human population hit 4 billion in 1974, 5 billion in 1987, 6 billion in 1999, and 7 billion in 2012. It's at the point where we are growing by 1 billion people nearly every 12-13 years. That is not very sustainable for a long period of time no matter how you look at it, especially with the modernization of third world countries. With the development of those countries comes increased life expectancy and lower birth rates with access to medicine, education, housing, and sanitation. So with that you say okay, the birth rate decreases, but life expectancy increases. What does that mean? That still results in more people being born than people dying, thus still net population gain. And not only is that net gain, but that is net gain people who live longer. So that means 11 billion people. Obviously not all 11 billion inches reality, projected in 2100 will live longer and die less often while still the population increases. I am definitely not an expert on population growth and resource usage by humans, but it definitely is not a good outlook overall. Then we get to the actual problem. Limited resources on Earth. The population now alone overconsumes. What will happen when we have reached the 10-11 billion mark? We are slowly killing our own species, and the species around us, as we have to increase our consumption every year to account for our population growth and extended life expectancies. To put it simply, it takes Earth 18 months or so to produce the ecological services humanity uses in 1 year with 7.2 billion people. What will happen when the population reaches 11 billion? It's not a matter of if we run out of resources due to population and consumption. It's when. Graph of human population since 10,000 BC. Rocco's basilisk. A super intelligent AI will determine how to retroactively punish those who did not help it come onto existence. A supercomputer in the future will kill you today for not helping it 10 years from now. Edit. A word. There's a really brutal one I've heard but can't remember its name. It basically says that every horrible thing you can imagine has been done by someone in the world at some points in human history. I can think of some pretty messed up things and it creeps me out that they may have been done before. Eternal hell. It's literally the worst thing any human can imagine, that by being a bad person you will be condemned to torture for an infinite amount of time. You might be able to reason that it's justifiable to be tortured for as long as you lived or some algorithm related to such, but eternity is overkill for the sins committed during an unimaginably minute sliver of time. If you get deep into particle physics, you start to realize that there really is no such thing as solid matter. Everything in the universe appears to be built upon waves of vibrating energy, and if you look deep enough at anything, there's really nothing there at all. And we don't actually exist as matter in space-time in the way you think we do. This concept supports a smorgasbord of fantastical theories. The idea we live in a simulation. The idea that there's actually a god of some sort. The idea there's multiple universes. Some say an infinite number of them. Or any number of other interesting ideas. If no one pushes the button, Reddit gets shut down. That clits are just tiny D's. Suck on that. Homophobes. That I'm actually retarded, so everyone treats me like I'm normal. Late to the party in this may get lost, but I highly suggest you read The Last Question by Isaac Asimov. When God and Lucifer had their battle in heaven, the devil actually won and cast out God. Now he is sitting up in heaven, pretending to be God while he wreaks havoc down here. It would explain a lot. Edit, as per suggestion. Writing prompt here. Quantum suicide, quantum immortality. The idea that we never really die in our perspective. Every time we encounter a situation where we may die, we continue on in a parallel universe where something happens that prevents our death. But we die in the original universe, in a sense. Our consciousness lives on by transferring itself to a parallel universe where we continue to exist. That you will forever relive your own life. It does make a lot of sense, because once you die you don't belong anywhere, not space or time, and you always exist during the time you were alive, so you might just be constantly experiencing it all. Even if your life is good, it is pretty horrible to know that all that you learned will disappear, and every mistake you do anything to take back will be repeated and experienced over and over. But think of most lives and it gets infinitely worse, and then those that were extraordinarily horrible. Talk about unfair. I'm beginning to regret opening this thread now. The one about the Rugrats being a figment of Angelica's mental instability. One day mankind will have access to weapons more powerful than nuclear warheads, and they'll be used in anger. That a computer smart enough to pass the Turing test would also be smart enough to know to fail it. Think about that for a little bit, then fail to fall asleep tonight. Quantum immortality is pretty scary. Every time the universe splits, your consciousness only continues on into one of the created universes. Eventually we all end up being the sole inhabitant of a universe filled with P-zombies. That is, people who act normally but lack conscious inner lives. What's worse, we continue to live despite a never-ending series of things that nearly kill us: illness, losing limbs, becoming incredibly old and infirm. So we cannot die but are stuck with increasingly terrible, lonely lives for all eternity. This is called the false vacuum death of the universe. It's kinda on line with cold death and heat death, but a lot more sudden. That the universe can be gone in an instant and we wouldn't notice because we'd get wiped out by another expanding universe. I'll try my best to explain as simple as I can get it. Think of it as a wave. Universe A and Universe B are waves. A is bigger than B. Due to A being more stable and larger, it swallows up Universe B. With this, we might not even notice. It goes at the speed of light, so we won't be able to see it ahead of time. Edit. The effects perhaps are drastically different depending on how stable each universe is to each other and what happens at the event horizon. The Phantom Time Hypothesis. The Phantom Time Hypothesis is a historical conspiracy theory advanced by German historian and publisher Harry Buttelig, born 1947, which proposes that the year 613 was followed by the year 911 and that historical events between AD 614 and 911 and the early Middle Ages of Europe and neighboring regions are either wrongly dated or did not occur at all, and that there has been a systematic effort to cover up that fact. The hypothesis suggests a conspiracy by the Holy Roman Emperor Otto II, Pope Sylvester II, and possibly the Byzantine Emperor Constantine VI to fabricate a dating system that placed them at the special year of AD 1000, and to rewrite history, inventing the heroic figure of Charlemagne among other things. Edit. Not suggesting I believe it, rather that it's scary that others do, as you Sandora notes below. Two possibilities exist. Either we are alone in the universe or we are not. Both are equally terrifying. Arthur C. Clarke. Special relativity. If there really is no way to exceed the speed of light, ever, no matter how clever, the universe will never be explored. Can't think of the name off the top of my head, but I would say that experiment where students at a uni were playing officers and prisoners in a jail. It shows just how ducked we can be. Rocco's Basilisk. A godlike guy from the future is going to torture you for eternity, and yet the only way to even lessen this torture is to slavishly devote the rest of your life to bringing this eye into existence. That there is a god, I am sorry, but considering all the wars, the travesties, the pains and horrors that we, as human beings, have caused upon ourselves throughout our history, even our known history is terrifying. To think that there is some god that thinks this is all okay, scares me to think what he thinks is bad. Star Trek style teleportation will someday be created. It works by taking someone apart and reassembling them at the other end from pure particles. So, what if consciousness did not make the leap? This means every time someone is beamed, they die and are cloned at the other end with memories intact. And then society develops in a direction where everyone is killing themselves over and over, some only living for a few minutes. Quantum immortality. On the short term it might give you some comfort, but in the long term your ability to function as an observer doesn't require you to actually have any of your senses intact, nor does it suggest your near-death experiences would be painless. You could theoretically survive being ejected into space due to quantum shenanigans on a macro scale. You'll survive beyond humanity, beyond all other life probabilistically, and spend an uncountable amount of time alone waiting for the heat death of the universe. The transcension hypothesis. Are we truly alone? Does anyone else just have moments where you realize where you are in space and see how tiny life is? Only for like 10 seconds and then come back to reality? The statistical probability that not everyone who reads this thread will still be alive by Christmas. Edit. Cody has gone. But hope you are all still out there. This isn't a theory really, but the concept of infinity is terrifying. Every possible thing happens eventually, and World War II and Taco Bell are both plausible outcomes given the laws of our universe. I don't remember where from, but there's a theory floating around out there that memory is based on entropy, meaning that your brain decays in such a way that everything you've ever done has already been done. Essentially, you had free will at one point, but at the moment your brain is just catching up to the decisions you have previously made. You're just along for the ride now. The Nemesis Star Hypothesis by Richard Muller. This hypothetical dwarf star is a mechanism to explain the periodic mass extinction events on Earth, recorded in the geologic record roughly every 26 million years. If our sun was actually a member of a binary system, with a dwarf companion on a highly elliptical orbit, we might not even know it. Dwarf stars are dim enough to be camouflaged amongst the background of our galactic neighborhood. This dwarf star would have an orbital distance of something like 1.5 light years. Every 26 million years, it would make a close approach to the inner solar system, perturbing the asteroids or comets and raining doom on Earth at regular intervals. This theory is plausible enough that ongoing work is being done to search for a nemesis candidate. There is a section of one of his Berkeley class lectures online where Muller explains it, but I'm not sure which one it was. Terror management theory. Everything that humanity has ever accomplished beyond basic survival has been motivated by a fundamental and irreducible fear of non-existence. Our conception of self and self-esteem generally is simply a buffer against the anxiety that comes with recognizing that we will cease to be. Culture is just a massive shared delusion to mitigate our fear of the unknown and ultimately of death. Thus we want to imagine certain works of art as timeless or to place value in family lines and offspring. To project ourselves beyond death, we take comfort in our value systems and the structures that arise from them, whether that's through conceptions of biological kinship, national political identity, religious faith, etc. This includes belief in the inherent value of ensuring the future of humanity through scientific progress. Indeed, much of modern Western life is devoted to the avoidance of death. The various euphemisms and stock phrases in the morning, the entire funeral home industry that serves to remove death from the ordinary course of life, from the home and onto the embalming table or onto the crematorium. We build up the artifice to avoid the brutal reality. There are no turtles at the bottom. It's nothingness all the way down. TLDR. Everything that we've ever done and ever will do is motivated by nothing more than our existential terror in confronting death. Edit 1. I really appreciate the gold. To counter the bleakness, I need to clarify that this isn't necessarily my worldview, and it's certainly not my favorite pet theory. It offers an answer to a fundamental why so that we can focus on the far more important and far more interesting questions regarding meaning making, value creation, cultural development, lived existence itself. This theory doesn't have to be a conversation stopper. In fact, it should be a springboard into fine-tuned discussions about the things that make us human without getting bogged down in the navel-gazing big-picture questions. Also, many have pointed out that this theory owes a great debt to the philosopher Ernest Becker and his Pulitzer-winning work, The Denial of Death. Finally, if you're deeply troubled by this theory and its potential implications, I've been offering this quote as a sort of affirmation of the human spirit. If I were dropped out of a plane into the ocean and told the nearest land was 1,000 miles away, I'd still swim, and I'd despise the one who gave up. Abraham Maslow. Leave your little mark on the world even if you're staring down the barrel. That's what it means to be human. Edit 2. Yes, this is basically a soft science approach to 100 years of existential continental philosophy, especially Kierkegaard bleeding into Heidegger and Wittgenstein, then postmodernism. Camus especially. Edit 3. I've truly appreciated the great discussions that this post has sparked, much to the detriment of my work tonight. Several folks with far more knowledge about this theory than me are posting in the thread below. Check it out. Final quotes for the night. Two that I've lived by and treasured when spending time with family and friends. The best part of life. The mystery of human existence lies not in just staying alive, but in finding something to live for. Even if we are occupied with important things, even if we attain great honor or fall into misfortune, still let us remember how good it was once here when we were all together, united by a good and kind feeling, which made us better, perhaps, than we are. Fyodor Dostoevsky, The Brothers Karamazov. We could just be in a turtle's dream in outer space. I think Mitch Hedberg's theory about Bigfoot takes the cake. I think Bigfoot is blurry. That's the problem. It's not the photographer's fault. Bigfoot is blurry, and that's extra scary to me. There's a large, out of focus monster roaming the countryside. Bill Bryson explained that each one of us are the result of all of our direct ancestors, reaching reproduction age without dying or being killed. For the last 2.3 billion years, from the first cells dividing, all the way through evolution, not one of them died. That makes all of us very fortunate indeed. And if you are lucky enough to reproduce as well, then you have played your part in a long line of survival. Graham's number. Not exactly a theory. It is an actual, finite number that has been calculated to exist. It is so large that if you wrote each of its digits onto individual atoms, there are not enough atoms in the observable universe to fully express a number. It is, however, possible to calculate the last 50 digits of Graham's number. The last digit is 7. No one knows what the first digit is, and no one ever will. Try to imagine a life without timekeeping. You probably can't. You know the month, the year, the day of the week. There is a clock on your wall or the dashboard of your car. You have a schedule, a calendar, a time for dinner or a movie, yet all around you, timekeeping is ignored. Birds are not late. A dog does not check its watch. Deer do not fret over passing birthdays. Man alone measures time. Man alone chimes the hour. And, because of this, man alone suffers a paralyzing fear that no other creature endures. A fear of time running out. Uso Mitch album. The Timekeeper. I know that death isn't a theory, but as a concept death is surely the most terrifying thing that can be for a sentient creature surely, whether it's your own, everyone you care about, everyone in general. The constant march of technology, given enough time, will eventually lead to the creation of computers powerful enough to simulate reality perfectly. Once this technology level is reached, a given society will create more and more perfect simulations of reality. The life in those simulations will eventually grow to the point where they will be able to create their own simulations. The life in those simulations will eventually grow to the point where they will be able to create their own simulations. This process will continue for every layer of simulations, effectively creating infinite simulations to one reality. Therefore, either mankind will be destroyed before achieving a level of technology that allows for the creation of perfect simulations, or, statistically speaking, the odds are infinity 1 against you being real. The afterlife is a pre-death hallucination. I mean, heaven and or hell could be the last thoughts of your brain, having subconsciously been formed and created over years of life, and then sent to your main brain before the moment of brain death. You could still be perceiving this thought for what feels like minutes to an hour. Then, nothing. I mean, I know how this sounds, but have you ever actually died? It tends to be a one-way trip, and those who came back say they saw the spiritual visions that had been spoon-fed to them all their lives, and most of them only stayed clinically dead for an hour. Tops. Death in itself is terrifying, acting as an ultimate curtain, a barrier beyond which few have come back from, and remains one of the few things we can honestly call a mystery. But hey, you're probably not even reading this because it's at the bottom. But if you are, I honestly am grateful.